Happy Bodhi Day. Hi, my name is Josh Kilroy. I'm the Executive Director of Living in Kindness. And today, December 8th, is Bodhi Day, Bodhi. And it's a day that Buddhists across the world celebrate the Buddha achieving enlightenment under a Bodhi tree. So, like many things involving the history of Buddhism, we have no accurate historical information about the Buddha and how he lived his life, whether he even existed. All of this is open for discussion. But the myth that we celebrate is, the Prince Gautama, who was, he was the prince in a small principality, right along the India-Nepal border. He lived his life in great luxury. His father went to great lengths to prevent him from seeing suffering. There had been a prophecy when he was born that he would be either a great spiritual leader or a great warrior. His father, as a king, wanted him to be a great warrior. So he tried to shield him, according to these myths, from any suffering that might have caused him to ask serious questions. So he grew up, in great privilege and luxury, but nonetheless, he grew curious, and he, according to myth, asked his sort of keeper, protector, a person assigned to, a security person, I guess you would say. They arranged for secret trips outside of the castle to the world. And according to legend, he made 3 of these trips. On one trip, he saw an extremely poor person and was moved by their suffering. On the next trip, he saw an extremely sick person and was moved by their suffering. And then on a third trip, they saw an old person dying. So he Gautama reflected on this suffering, and it became an obsession. So, how can we avoid this? And certainly, he knew by then that living a life of luxury was not, and engaging in sensual pursuits would not end that suffering or the concern about suffering. So he went on a mission. So he had a family, he had a wife, he had young kids, he had responsibilities in the kingdom. He forsaked all of that to go on a spiritual journey. And he spent, again, according to myth, about 5 years going to all of the most learned people of the day, asking them for their opinions on how to end suffering, how should we live, and was dissatisfied with all the responses to one degree or another. In accordance with quite common spiritual tradition at the time, he became an extreme ascetic, sort of eschewing healthy food, all the comforts, basically living without shelter, in a state of starvation and deprivation. And he did that again. We don't know how long, but according to legend, it was an extended period of time, years, and he was a part of a community of ascetics who practiced these extreme acts of deprivation. And then at one point, he sort of hit a bottom where he was lying on the ground, emaciated, on the verge of death, and realized that this was not the path. So, in the same way that a life full of sensual experiences was not the answer, neither was a life full of extreme deprivation the answer. So he accepted an offering of sort of like a rice gruel from a young girl in the village where he was, and he began to sort of feed himself and recover from this deprivation. But he was still seeking an answer to his question. So finally, he came upon this tree. Today, they have a tree in India that is marked as the Bodhi tree, and it's a pilgrimage site for Buddhists across the world. Presumably, it is not the actual tree, Presumably, there have been several trees in the 2,500 years since the Buddha lived. But that's where people choose to celebrate his achievement. So he sat down in front of the tree and said, "I will not wake up or sit up until I have an answer to my question." And he sat there and he meditated. And again, the myths vary on how long he was there. Some people said it was in the course of one night. Some say he was there for many days. Doesn't matter how long it was. And he had sort of three sets of experiences. One where he was tempted by a demon, Mara, to abandon his quest, but tempted with power and pleasure and all of those things. And he went through that. He relived his past experiences. And then he had a second cycle, discovered the principle of karma. And then a third where and karma and the Eightfold Path. And then he had a third sort of cycle where he uncovered the Four Noble Truths and nirvana. And at that point, he was enlightened. So that's the myth that's around that. And then he had a decision to make. He had this powerful truth, and he had to decide whether it was too powerful for other people, that he should just let them live their lives without burdening them with these powerful truths, or he could share it. And he ultimately decided to share it. And he went back to this community of ascetics that he had been a part of, and they immediately sensed his his change, his moral gravitas, and they became his first converts. So that's sort of the general story. And then, they started spreading the word about Buddhism, what we now call Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the other core principles of Buddhism. So, what enlightenment? Again, there is today, as you know, we have many Buddhist traditions, and they do not all agree on what enlightenment is. One question is enlightenment something that can be attained in an instant, or is it something that needs to be cultivated over many years? And another question is it the overcoming of, is it the attainment of omniscience or other sort of earthly powers like that, immortality of one's soul or whatnot? And so, there are these disagreements. The tradition of Neo-Buddhism that living kindness practices believes that, full enlightenment is a goal to aspire to, but it is something that, is in practice unattainable. But what we can do is we can have glimpses. And that's where the meditation practice comes in. That's where, practicing the Eightfold Path comes in. And, for myself, as somebody who is still early on in the path, it's a lifelong process. I've been doing this only a few years, but, I'm appreciative when I get glimpses. And that first glimpse, and I remember where I was when it happened, but the first glimpse is the most powerful one because it shows that it's possible, right? I mean, you can be living and sort of practicing, and it's like, is this really, am I getting anywhere? And then once you have that first moment of enlightenment, you know that it's there somewhere. And if it's not something that you can live 24/7, 365, it's still there and it can still, improve your life. Because once you know it's possible, and once you, have the spiritual practice to find that state even fleetingly, you can achieve enduring improvements in one's life, including, greater peace of mind, equanimity, charity, the things that we look for, that we strive for. So this is the Buddha He was building on the traditions of his time, but really it marked an important step forward. What did the Buddha find? He found that nothing is permanent, the impermanence of all things. He discovered that, the non self as one of those things that is non existent. He discovered the principle of, nirvana, and he analyzed the causes of suffering, right? He identified that, the Four Noble Truths. The first is, there is suffering in life. It is, a core part of our human experience. The second noble truth, of course, is that the suffering is caused by craving for money, for attention, for power, for whatever it might be. Third is that the cessation of craving is the end of suffering. And then fourth is the practicing of the Eightfold Path. So achievement enough for one person, I say. But today, December 8th, is a day where we celebrate the Buddha's achievement, whether it was, an actual person or gradual revelation that a community of people had, we'll never know. We don't even know what language the Buddha spoke. We assume it's one of the, Pali languages, but we have no record of anything he said in his lifetime directly. It was 400 years later. The Buddha lived approximately, 500 to 600 years before Christ. And it wasn't until, 200 BC that anyone started writing anything down. So it's an enigma shrouded in a mystery, so to speak. But the achievement is real. At some point, no one thought that understood suffering this way. And at some point, 2,500 years ago, people did begin to understand that. And that's an achievement that we celebrate and build on in our daily lives every day. So it's a great day to celebrate. I thank you all for joining me and have a great day.